Okay, this is just a quick video for, high school, college, grad school level students to simply describe how a cell is like a city. Okay, the best hard drive in the world is the DNA. It's so concise and small and stores a tremendous amount of information. Human chromosomes have 3.3 billion base pairs. DNA for a city can be thought of like the blueprints for building the city and also for actively replenishing things as they need to be remade, like the proteins. Okay, the nucleus is the town hall of the city. Glycolysis is like a coal-burning electrical plant because you only get about 2 ATP from running glycolysis, a glucose molecule through that. Mitochondria is much more powerful. It's like a nuclear power plant. And the mitochondria is incredibly sophisticated. It splits the atom. It splits the hydrogen atom into the electrons, which are passed down through the electron transport chain, and into the protons, the nucleus of the hydrogen atom, which is pumped into the intramembranous space. And that builds up a gradient of concentrated protons in the intramembranous space. And that gradient is then harvested by allowing a proton to come back through ATP synthase to add a phosphate to ADP and make ATP, the energy currency of the cell. Okay, so that concentration gradient of protons in the intramembranous space is like a pressurized air pump, basically. Okay, the plasma membrane has a lot of ion pumps, which have the equivalent effect of being an electrical battery because you have a charge separation between the gradients outside the cell and inside the cell. You have current flow because the charged ions flow through the ion channels in the cell membrane, like the sodium channel, for example. And then that generates additional gradients that are used to pump things in and out of the cell. Okay, for example, the sodium electrochemical gradient produced by the plasma membrane sodium-potassium ATP pumps is used then for the NACA exchanger, the Na for sodium, Ca for calcium, to pump calcium out of the cell, which is very important, especially in brain cells, neurons, and in muscle cells. Okay, the next thing is the plasma membrane is like the city wall, the outer limit of the cell. It's also like a toll booth. Vacuoles store water for when the cell needs water. You got vesicles that are like transport trucks, and they'll send from the center of the cell, cytoplasm, they'll send neurotransmitters and hormones to outside the city. They merge with the plasma membrane and release their contents through exocytosis to outside the cell. Flagellas are just like motors. They're incredibly complex. There's a PhD scientist by the name of Michael Behe who's written entire books about the complexity of the flagella motor and how miraculous it is. The cytoplasm is like the atmosphere of the cell, and it's really an aqueous atmosphere. It's a water-like atmosphere. And it's even a little more complicated than that. We're not going to get into this in great detail, but there is the concept of 4 phases of water. Everybody knows there's liquid water, there's water vapor gas, and there's ice, solid water. But there's actually a 4th phase of water where it is like a gel, and that gel is the most important thing for the way water is in the body. Okay, it's liquid in the blood, in the plasma, but in most of the rest of the body, it's more of a gel. Okay, and that's also why when somebody has a puncture wound, they can bleed, but you don't see water coming out of them. Well, how is it that you don't see water coming out of them if humans are supposed to be 60% water? Okay, it's because it's in a gel phase. Okay, microtubules. Microtubules are the roads or the railroad tracks. Some people also say the endoplasmic reticulum, which has its amoeba-like extensions all over the place in a cell, is another type of a road as one of its functions, and there's some truth in that. So microtubules are like roads, are also accurately described as being like railroad tracks. Rough endoplasmic reticulum is a spot for protein synthesis. The rough refers to the ribosomes, and they're also sometimes called the workers for making proteins. So it's a factory for making proteins. And proteins can do all kinds of things. Most of the things done in the cell are done by proteins. There's things called chaperone proteins that help a protein to fold correctly. And they're kind of like nurses' aides helping an elderly patient to get dressed. You've got a smooth endoplasmic reticulum, so it's smooth because it lacks ribosomes. But the smooth endoplasmic reticulum makes lipids and it makes steroid hormones. The endoplasmic reticulum also has an overall function to store as like a bank for storing calcium ions. And again, calcium ions are super important. Calcium ions are like the aristocrat ion of a cell. The magnesium, potassium, and sodium, they're like the minimum wage workers. Okay, but calcium comes like an aristocrat. It's like flipping a switch on when calcium rises in the cytoplasm to make the cell do whatever cells do. When calcium rises in the cytoplasm, it causes the neuron in the brain to release its neurotransmitter. In a muscle, it will cause the cell to contract. So whatever's the main thing that cell does, sudden increase in calcium in the cytoplasm will tend to activate it. Golgi apparatus is more like a post office for making sure that the just produced proteins or lipids go wherever they're supposed to go. It sort of puts a destination address onto them, stamps it onto them. Okay, the lysosome is a recycling plant. Peroxisomes are similar. We more often talk about lysosomes, though. Recycling plant to recycle old, worn-out proteins and other structures. Okay, HSP are the heat shock proteins, and they're kind of like garbage trucks. They will transport the old, worn-out, defunct, defective proteins to the lysosome for recycling. Okay, ubiquitins sort of stamp proteins for degradation. Okay. The immune system has several different functions. One of them is like a plumber for fixing problems. It can also be described for a cleanup crew for removing damaged tissue, repairing damaged tissue, and also is a guard for the body and defense. Okay, clotting proteins have engineering-like functions to fix leaks. So these are some of the metaphors that explain how a cell does. And the incredible thing is, life on Earth figured out how to do all this a long, long time ago, long before humans figured out how to do all this stuff. So I hope you found that helpful.